Feeling jazzed. Here we go. Hey, everybody, and welcome to the Amusing Panda live stream, your musing and amusing source for all things War Machine. This week, I am going to be joined by Daniel from Tucson, who is coming on to have a bit of a freewheeling concept development discussion based on a strange chain of events. Apparently a few years ago, I said something to one of our mutual locals, Chris Zaborowski, about caster inevitability. And then that came back to him, that came back to Daniel, and we set ourselves up to really flesh this idea out, which I think is going to be actually very impactful in the way the metagame is changing in the very, very near future. But in the meantime, Daniel is getting himself home from being on the road. So we are going to go into some news and announcements. Get mine pulled up here. So the big news and announcements, there have been, a number of pieces of lore drop and sneak previews here and there, but not necessarily a ton of rules. And this guy is rules. So we have Behemoth, Spirit of Imperial Khador. Another one of the super heavies gets dropped. I think just given the offensive profile versus existing models like Medveditsa or Razor, it's fair to assume that this guy is pretty much as you're going to see him in January. And he is an interesting one. Behemoth of the past has not necessarily been a super sophisticated model. And this sort of doesn't change. So we've got sort of an ultra premium price tag sitting at 23 points. He's got his traditional full 36 box grid. Sort of the new features for Behemoth are 1, not being speed 4, 2, being arm 22, and coming with a whole host of advantage icons. So we're looking at Pathfinder and Cavalry being major notable adds. Behemoth has yet another variation of the subcortex rule, this time being advanced subcortex. So this would be he gains gunfighter, so he can fire while in melee at things he's not in melee with. Noticeably, the Bombards lack pistol anyways. And he gets boosted ranged attack rolls. Behemoth picks up Bulldoze, which feels like an appropriate rule for is basically, the biggest non-colossal jack, who is also now a tank jack. Picks up Roadblock, which is particularly interesting on an 80 mil model. Roadblock, he's this big and he gives cover to models blocked by him. Oh gosh, does the Bison have this offhand? It's been so long since I've thought seriously about Khador. Hey, we got Daniel.
David.
How you doing?
Good. How are you, Cosmo?
Jesus, my brain. I'm sorry. I was telling you about how shot my brain is over the last few weeks. Good Lord. David, yes, sorry about that. Oh my God. All right. Yeah. So we're on Behemoth. So he shares a lot in common with the Bison. New additions on this guy, massive. So I pulled this up specifically just to go through what it does. A Colossal, which he essentially counts as for the person of this rule, cannot be pushed, knocked down, or made stationary. A Colossal cannot be moved by a slam or a throw. A Colossal is never affected by the rules of least disturbance. A Colossal cannot be affected by the Grievous Wound special rule. If a Colossal would require another huge base. So this is a least disturbance rule that I can't think of a situation where this last portion of the massive rule would come up, but at least not in the current iteration of the game. But he can't be pushed, he can't be slammed, he can't be thrown, he can't be knocked down, he can't be made stationary, and he can't be grievous wounded. Interestingly, this also doesn't seem to preclude placing or repositioning like on, conventional colossals. Do I have that right?
Yes, I think so.
Okay, so this guy essentially he can be placed, but for all intents and purposes, he essentially has even more beneficial immovable object.
Yeah, it's just an 80 with pluses.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like those are all a great set of features to have, especially on top of armor 22 with 36 boxes. Like, this guy is going to be particularly hard to displace, and even more so for any Khador caster that happens to come out of the January change carrying an arm buff with them.
Yeah, I mean, right now they have an arm buff, right? So he can get to armor 24, which is pretty solid.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Iron Flesh is sitting in the faction as is. So I guess for the next handful of weeks, you can definitely terrorize some people with him.
Yeah, the funny thing too that somebody in our Discord mentioned is that it can still be stealthed because it's an
Nice.
80. So you can stealth it and then hide models behind it with roadblock.
Oh, that's obnoxious. Oh yeah, because roadblock makes no mention of stealth.
Yeah.
Wait, so what's the mechanism for getting him stealth in Winter Core? Oh, is this Field Marshal Prowl coming off of Vilcool? Okay, that's pretty disgusting. Oh, dog. Oh, come here, Stinky. Stinky. Nope, he doesn't want to come here. Yeah, so what's your thoughts on this guy? 23 is a ton of points to be paying for a model like this. I think this is the most expensive super heavy we've seen so far. Where do you think this guy is going to slot in?
I think it seems like a pretty solid model. The subcortex system giving it gunfighter and bonuses to ranged attack rolls is really nice. So it's rat 5, but it's really not. So you get 2 shots with that for your charge attack. Your first one, because it's also a cavalry model, it's decently likely to get a crit, better than normal at least. So I think that's kind of nice, giving it like if they keep superiority in one of the casters or something like that. It's 6 inches, but like it can go faster. You can place it. All those kinds of things are pretty good. So I think that there's a lot of opportunity for the model to succeed, but it is expensive.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Because you are looking at like a quarter list commit for this guy.
Oh yeah.
I mean, if somebody's like so casters with baked in speed buffs, you're looking at somebody like what's his name, Savrin, who just happens to be sitting on escort. So if that stays, you've got a speed 8 super heavy that's not just exerting pressure through its personal melee weapons, but also like charging, getting in there, getting a shot at a crit pow 21 armor piercing, and then like firing free bombards before even deciding what to do with the rest of its focus.
Yeah, with gunfighter, it can charge in and then shoot things. So it can shoot pretty far into the back at range 12.
Right. Yeah, I wonder if there's I can't recall any ways offhand to, start to give this guy hit and run potential in the faction, like generous allocation of reposition abilities. But that might be something to, to keep an eye out for too, especially as, as the casters that are supporting this model change. Um, depending on where the rest of the stable lands too. This guy might be like Behemoth was in some past editions, where like, what's your battle group? Well, unless I'm given compelling reason, Behemoth.
Yeah, I think it kind of plays that role, right? Just a solo battle group model a lot of times.
Yeah. Yeah, so that was the big news I was aware of, and it's very exciting to see this guy back in, and you know to get a taste of that, come mid to late January. This is, the kind of thing that's gonna fly at a quarter of your points. Let's see, we got Jeff in here. I think the biggest weakness of this is anything that can give it the ability to attack certain columns, and hitting it down the 3 or 4 for any number of damage will really wreck its day. That's an interesting point. You do have to hit it to the 3 and 4 for 4 damage each. I'm not aware of a ton of column choosing that goes on in the game right now. Are you?
No, I think Storm Legion has one, right?
The sharpshooter has marksman. The snipers have marksman, but like I don't think you're worried about winter core snipers. Like,
yeah, I don't know. I don't see it as a big downside either. Also, you're just losing gunfighter and boosted ranged attacks. I think by the time that it's going to take damage to its S slots, it's already going to be in melee with something.
Yeah. Although, unlike past iterations of Behemoth, you can take out its bombards. It does lose them along with its left and right arms.
Yeah.
But those left and right arms are 11 damage boxes deep on each side. So.
Yeah, it's a lot of boxes.
Yeah. I mean, he picks up grievous wound immunity, and I think the hardest thing about picking up grievous wound immunity is that your standard issue mechanic in the faction is quite not good. Like this poor fella is just aggressively miscosted. Because he's slow and he doesn't benefit from unit movement, and repair only being a 1-inch thing, especially when Behemoth is faster than him. That can be a struggle.
Repair and tune up being a 1-inch range is really hard.
Yeah. So hopefully this guy will see some love come January, and it'll be meaningful to capitalize on the absence of grievous wounds. But yeah, right now there's not a lot of great ways to take damage off the Behemoth's grid.
No knockdown, push or slam, though, is pretty relevant too a lot of times.
Oh, no, yeah. I mean, based on, what we were talking about, a few weeks ago, about the changing face of the metagame and what to evaluate for meaningful practice and things that may pick up value is, the ability to apply slams and other knockdown effects at range. Behemoth giving cover and near as makes no difference not being movable basically gives winter core casters like remarkably safe places to stand.
Yeah, and roadblocks, so it's always cover, so you just stand behind it and you're pretty safe.
Yeah, and if you feel like forking out points for the bison too, like you can run 2 of them, like having the bison just slightly hook the Behemoth. So it's slightly less comprehensive. It's slightly less comprehensive. Steady, sturdy also doesn't get you in trouble. Like you're in sort of an invincible fortress.
Yeah. You can also, boost its damage in the
Mhm,
faction, boosting
mhm,
its damage, boosting its armor, boosting its speed. I imagine that some of those iterations are going to stick around, whether they're different spells or not. They'll be able to do those things. And that's all pretty relevant with this model, it feels like.
mhm, mhm. Oh, we got Stephen Williams in the house. Welcome, Stephen. What are we talking about tonight? Math. Only incidentally will we be talking about math. The vaunted mathesode is not yet here. But yeah, any closing thoughts for you, David, on the behemoth before we kick over to our concept development topic of the night?
I don't think anything serious. I'm excited to see it on the table for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, it will definitely be a twist. All right. Let's get this guy off the screen and talk about caster inevitability. So while you were getting set up, I sort of gave the short version. Chris had like this noggin in his jogging, and then you reached out to me last week. What did you make of this concept, and what sort of impact of well, I guess we should explain. How did you take caster inevitability to be?
So, how I understood it from Chris saying that this was something that you guys had talked about back in like 2018 or something, was
Mhm,
the idea that it is something that you should consider depending on the meta or your army, that how good your caster is at killing things on their own can be really important to closing out the game.
mhm,
And with his point was with the concept changing, that you know lethality is going down, and things are going to be less good in general at killing other things. Your casters probably are going to still be better or stay the same as at killing things. So casters that are especially good at killing things will be valuable. Like things like Kane and stuff.
right. Right. Yeah. There's two facets to it. One, the anticipation is that, while warjacks and units may see, one or more of their offensive stats drop, um, that casters are by and large seem to be slated to not suffer decline in their offensive stats.
Yeah.
Um, and like that's a big deal. So like, when like they're effectively like almost every caster is effectively picking up +1 defense just by the lethality drops, so they will be natively more survivable. And then in addition to that, their offensive stats are relative to the rest of the field more premium. They also have resources backing it up and the ability to make multiple attacks to boost, which is something that I think is, like the lethality drop, even if Warjacks and Warbeasts get hit, it's sort of an indirect buff to them that they always have built in ways to overcome this. But like casters in particular, um, will sort of see both their defensive values just get better relatively, and their offensive values appreciate relatively. This doesn't affect everyone, symmetrically, like Baronova, like nobody cares if her suite of, rinky dink POW 10s and 12s are relatively better than most of the field. But for somebody like Kane, for somebody like Butcher, for somebody like Horace, for somebody like Boomhowler under the effect of Storm Rager, like this matters a lot. And even potentially for casters like casters whose kit was like, is it there? Maybe it's almost there. Like Fire Quill. may go from like being marginal in the current meta to being like, oh no, this guy's a menace now.
Yeah, exactly. I think that that is relevant, like casters becoming more lethal in
Mm-hmm.
terms of just the game.
Mm-hmm.
But also I think that the idea of sometimes picking a caster for your pair that is just able to kill things when your army is going to struggle is going to make some casters better than they used to be. And I think
Right.
that's kind of where I would lean more into it
Mm-hmm.
is that concept and changing your thinking on picking a caster where, oh well, this guy's cool because he sometimes kills stuff too. Well, now that might be important because
Mm-hmm.
my models might not be able to kill everything that my opponent puts on the board, and my caster will have to do more work on their own.
Right. But there's a lot of angles to come at this with. You know, one of the things that's changing is like general lethality will affect the shape of the game and how a game develops. Um, you know, so sort of what the dynamic is right now is that like piece A slams into piece B. And, you know, sort of the way people are designing and thinking about building and so on and so forth is like 9 times out of 10, piece A kills piece B just on its own. And then piece C comes in and kills piece A, and piece D kills piece C. And you just go back and forth like that. Like everything in War Machine that gets fielded as a matter of course tends toward being explosively powerful. Um, and insofar as miss rate makes a dent in that usual dynamic, you know, I because I don't think what you're going to see is, you know, aside from like maybe some early games, I don't think you're going to be seeing a lot of people going like, oh yeah, commit A to B and, you know, commit C to D and on and like just down the line like, oh, A and C didn't kill. Whoopsie. What you're going to see is A and C kill B and then D and E kill one of, you know, A or C. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
But
so there
sometimes I think having your caster to clean up when A doesn't kill it because you're sending B and C at something else is
mhm.
going to matter. And having your caster be, good enough where they don't have to spend all of their resources or put themselves at risk sometimes completely is going to be something to think about.
Right. Yeah. If you have a model with elite offensive stats that can also have resources chasing it, as JRV 45 says, basically you're going to need more redundancies to kill one model. If you're talking about units like casters with like a brace of hand cannons, you know, can be cleanup crew very, very easily and minimize or reduce your resource commit, you know, to take out certain kinds of targets. Um, in this sort of world, what happens to support styled casters, Athena or Assyria, for example? Do they just get left behind? Let's come back to that one in a minute because I think that's a very interesting and important question, but I just don't think we're there yet in the discussion. But yeah, so your caster plays cleanup crew, but also, you know, one of the things that really changes is, you know, your caster can't be everywhere at once and is unlikely to clean up that many engagements. But it does mean that the pattern of engagements becomes scrummier. You know what I mean? Like in any given element of the peace trade rather than being 1 to 1, you know, scenarios which might be common are 2 to 1 and then 2 to 1 turns into 3 to 2 kind of things.
Yeah.
Like battle getting joined may not just be like trading back and forth casualties over the same strip of board space. It may be like this really balloons into a big knockdown drag out fight. What do you make of that?
I agree. I think that that also is like what makes the change exciting, right?
Mhm.
Is the idea that you get attacked or you attack another unit and they don't die completely, and then you get to have that unit attack back and send another unit in to help that unit out, and then maybe they don't kill everything, so it just, yeah, it does just keep ballooning, and
Mhm.
it makes like objective control more interesting than just like who wipes out the other guy's unit that they put in that spot first.
Right, yeah, because you may be like, rather than like, okay, I can't easily wipe out the entirety of, say we've gone into a 3-2 type engagement pattern, like, okay, I can't knock out, A, C, and E all in one go, but only A and elements of C are, what's controlling the scenario relevant area, so how do I like scalpel those out specifically? And casters can become a lot more impactful in that, especially because like one of the natures of scrum style engagements is the models start impeding ability to make board progress and maneuver against a caster. Like often to get a caster, unless you're rocking something like flight, ghost walk, maybe some really ambitious tactician plays, your models that would assassinate them may have a hard time navigating the mess to get to them.
Yeah, they get too tangled up in the battle.
Right, especially if all the combatants are less automatically able to like wipe out the models that they're engaged with. Um, so I mean, it's one of those things where like implicitly, like explicitly casters are getting relatively better defense and offense stats, but implicitly they're also getting more places to hide because offending against them becomes harder.
That makes
um
sense.
so I mean I think all of this adds up to uh um hmm I don't know if we're at all add up yet, because casters can also face the same problem of getting locked down in the scrum.
Well,
um
I think that the exciting thing about that though is that a lot of people like playing their casters because they think the caster is cool, or they like the abilities, and not
mhm,
just having them stand in the back and cast a couple spells a turn and then stay safe.
right,
So like having like a ragemonger or something like that, like go into the battle and like stay
mhm,
there, and like he kills a couple things and then passes turn and he's surrounded by his guys and a couple of your opponent's models, but there's no like clear line to send something big enough to just kill him in one turn at him, makes the game interesting.
right. Well, yeah, and I think that's where, the term inevitability starts to come into it. So just like, around the time that I was playing Chris, I was dabbling heavily in Signar and in Kador, and then obviously I did Scorn for years and years and years.
He said
Um
scorn.
huh?
He said scorn
Scorn?
specifically.
Yeah. So what comes along with that is like, and the casters I tended to favor while playing those factions, like there were some I spent time with that were like more supporty, more, like spell effects and stuff like that. But I tended to have a strong favor for casters who could do business personally. So this would be like your Butcher 3, Sorsha 1 to a limited extent. I absolutely adored Striker 2. Um, and then playing Scorn, I was playing a lot of God, in 2018 that probably would have been a lot of Tyrant Zadesh, which started out as counter Nemo 3 tech for the people who were in like War Machine archaeology mode. Nemo 3 used to be a metagame terrorist around that time, and I built a list specifically to power through him. And it turned out it did a lot more than that. But one of the great things about Zadesh was like Flashing Blade plus Flank War Beast. So while he wasn't like necessarily butcher level of dangerous, like, you know, casters like Zadesh, if he could just keep going forever, you would have a problem. Or casters like Makeda 3, like she can play on the back lines, but if she gets to do her offensive thing all the time, you have a problem.
Yeah, that was actually kind of how the conversation went. Was he is saying is that, you know, everybody's units will die throughout the game, and
Mhm,
eventually you'll have a Makeda 3 and they won't.
mhm. Right. Exactly. Yeah, and oh man, that was one of the funniest games I played in that epoch. Um I had a game that was Butcher 3 versus Kane 2. And that game ended with it was that scenario where there were the two flags diagonally opposed to each other and you got a lot of points for scoring your opponent's one. That game ended with Butcher and Kane on each other's flags, and they were the only models left alive. And like there was a round of both of them sitting there staring at each other saying like, I score my 2 points. Like, I score my 2 points. Like, oh yeah, we got to caster Inevitability real fast. Jay Beatnik says beat stick casters are so good because they control space in their personal output and force a movement away from scenario and create problems for your opponent just in avoiding what to feed your caster. Yeah, that's absolutely a thing. Um, yeah, like back in the day, Butcher 3 had that kind of dynamic. Like, I remember at one point I built a Butcher 3 army that ran like 5 units of Doom Reavers, and it wasn't like the old, you know, Butcher theme force where it was like million bazillion Doom Reavers, like, can you kill a million Doom Reavers? It was, no, these Doom Reavers are just going to run across the table, and their only job is to just hold your army in one place, prevent it from physically moving, so that Butcher can just come up and set up on it and kill everything that was locked in place. Um, but you know, sort of transitioning from that, did you ever wind up playing Brawl Machine, or is that just you
That
know?
was before my time.
Okay, I have heard legend that it still exists, but I have neither seen nor played a game of it in the current edition.
Yeah,
Uh,
we were gonna either do that or Legacy for our December Steamroller, and decided on Legacy when we
mhm,
voted,
mhm.
which was fun.
I mean, Brawl Machine is often fast enough that you can make it a best 2 out of 3 tournament, which is sometimes amusing. Um, but one of the curious things about Brawl Machine, the scenarios had narrower scoring margins. They tended to be a little closer together, and you were playing with like, I think, 30-point armies. Which is honestly about the size of a 30-point army now. Like, you're looking at like command starter or cadre sized armies. Everything was singleton. One of the things that was great about Brawl Machine was it was essentially an invented game mode that effectively simulated end game, which is one of the hardest phases of a game of War Machine to practice. Like, everybody gets to see early game. Most games you get to see mid game, and just because of like, you know, a mistake usually ends the game, you very rarely get to see end game in most play experiences, you know what I mean? um so it was almost like, you know, Brawl Machine was like starting a game of War Machine at the bottom of turn 4, it felt like. And one of the things that came with the format is just because of the reduced model count, casters became significantly more impactful. And like, this is true of late game too. The more personally impressive your caster is, generally the better they are in late game. It was to the point where the format had to have a ban list. Like, you cannot play Striker 2. You cannot play Butcher 3. You cannot play any iteration of Karchev because they're just too hard to beat. I think Gaston too eventually got banned at some point too, because he could be pretty egregious with his ability to take 4 fully boosted to hit signs importance hand cannon shots every activation.
So having the casters that we're kind of talking about, where they're too good on their own at killing stuff, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. Jeff mentions can't play Midas because he feeds back his whole battle group. Yeah, that's true. I mean, but honestly, like in normal late game scenarios, you know, a caster like Midas also probably would have blown his feet by the time we get there. But yeah, so it was this format that was all the rage for quite a while. I would actually love to kind of see it come back. Like, maybe I have to dig around and actually investigate where Brawl Machine is at.
I think we found some rules for it, and there were definitely some casters that were banned.
Oh man, yeah, it's not surprising because casters like, well, I don't know that Butcher 5 is necessarily going to be god tier in that format, but like there are stages of a game in War Machine where like have you ever played against Butcher 5 and gotten to watch him do his thing?
I've played him. I haven't watched somebody play him against me.
Oh, okay.
Though.
You have played him.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and you got to tee off the killing spree, or I guess it's technically Homicidal Maniac and Berserk and Blood Quenched.
Yeah, it was like 12 guys.
Yeah. And you're sitting there on like, well, I'm armor 30. What are you going to do about it? Oh, it turns out not much. What you're going to do about it is watch me do it again next turn. Awesome. Yeah, I think that's kind of an inevitability situation. And the less and less models there are on the board, the more inevitability becomes a problem. Because your number of answers are going down. Actually, you know, there's I don't remember if I ever talked about it on the show or not, but there's another model that in the game right now that is non-caster based and has inevitability as one of its major draws, and that is Invictus.
Oh yeah, I agree.
So like Magnus and Invictus don't have the raw offense of Carver and Warboar. They don't have the crazy utility and all phases or immovability of Nostilla and Aberration. What they have is these two guys go up on a side and they're shooting their guns every turn, and they maybe don't even have anybody supporting them. They're sort of just maneuvering around, and if you shoot them, you unlock Invictus going 16 inches with his still respectable melee power. So you don't want to do that. And in Magnus and Invictus, like they're decent scenario pieces because they're essentially skirmishing, but Invictus himself actually becomes a win condition. And that win condition is Invictus charges on turn 4 and kills the last heavy on the board. Invictus is near as makes no difference, armor 22 on full health. And
He's
by the way, if you if you attack him, things get worse. What are you going to do about Invictus? Invictus actually just ended this game by killing the last heavy and being on full health. So that's actually like, you know, I keep reaching back for like old War Machine, but that's a contemporary example of inevitability, like working as a plan.
Yeah, that's a very real one. You can't kill him if you don't have a heavy, unless you send your caster in and he could crit knock down you, and then you're real sad.
Let's see. What's the interesting thing as the counterpoint to caster inevitability is the point cost of models. Most Mark IV armies are too expensive to just throw away cheap units, but some legacy have cheap jammers. What do you think about that one?
I don't know if it's entirely true. Like if you look at like the Jackal, right? Like 5 or 6 points for a 24 box model. You can throw that on an objective pretty often and you don't really care as long as it does the thing, right? It captures it
Mm-hmm.
or contests it, and
And it
it's gonna
forces more than 5 points to come and get it.
exactly like it's always going to end up trading up in terms of like activation, even if it doesn't kill more than it's worth. It's going
Mm-hmm.
to cause your opponent to react to it, and then you will be able to take from them more than 5 points back.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, um, outside of that, let's see. Like, I think that
Tapper Marauder crews, especially if they're backed up with surgeons, like
yeah,
it even if you have the attacks to do it, it's a dicer's game, and they may just all come back.
or the ambushers. I
Yep,
can't remember what the
the boarding
unit's
crew,
called. Boarding crew. Yeah,
those guys are
dodge and
right
reciprocate.
bastards. Yeah.
Yes, and annoying. They definitely serve that purpose as really good jammers.
I would be surprised if all those defensive rules stuck if lethality is going down, because like effectively defense 15 dodge reciprocate just sounds like saying those words in everything goes down to Matt and Rat is it
In a
sounds
Rat
like your
5 world.
yeah, it's your doctor telling you have prostate cancer. Like a boarding crew just came onto your objective, like, oh, I guess I better call my wife.
Yeah. I can't think of any off the top of my head that are kind of similar, but there definitely are some that exist in
Mhm.
Mark IV armies too.
Oh, Storm Legion. Coursers are dirt cheap. They're often great offensive tools, but like defense 13, arm 16, 20 something boxes, they're not trivial to kill. Storm Blades are weirdly annoying to get rid of. Um, yeah, a lot of armies can find their chaff. If somehow Reaver units and Orgoth become decent, they may just be the kings of jam factions.
They are getting a slight buff in their defense stat, like you said.
Yeah, relatively. No, yeah. But actually, so that's another thing that's like, when you think about the changing shape of the peace trade and things going to like, you know, uh you know, sort of scrum dynamics rather than back and forth dynamics. And I think Keith and I talked about this in Panning for Gold. If you're looking at a defensive profile of 12-19, that goes from being like, it's pretty good to like most enemy heavies will genuinely struggle with that defensive profile. Like that's actually a problem in a world where everything's mat 6. Um you are putting some quite tanky numbers on the board. So like in my head, when I think things go towards scrum dynamics, it's like, unless I sit down and do the math, I'm like, well, Jax will still peace trade, right? And like, I don't know.
They might not.
Yeah, big maybe on that one.
Maybe like the character jacks will,
Mhm.
things like um, the general or
Death
you know,
Jack.
yeah, Death Jack, some of the character beasts, but
Mhm.
yeah, maybe not across the board anymore.
Right. Yeah. Well, yeah, because that if they maintain their mat or other offensive value of like a 7 or 8. I mean, I don't know that anybody's maintaining an 8, but that is a big deal for actually breaking the common defensive stat lines. And like you know it's very easy to forget in a world of ubiquitous carnage and similar effects that like what brine bloods can pretty easily hit 12-19 or better, sometimes with defensive buffs. uh what are they called? Dusk just out of hand has a 12-19 heavy that they can build for, I think, as cheap as like 11 points. um if you're mat 6, like an 11-point heavy that's defense 12, arm 19. There's not a lot of those you can get through efficiently, especially if they're backed up with somebody like Hazaroth who has the potential to heal them.
Or I'm thinking like the Primeval,
Mm-hmm.
like
Oh, sure. Yeah.
defense
13,
13, arm
18.
18. Yeah,
Yep.
that's if you can build those cheap, that's very obnoxious to try to kill all of them.
Right. Well, one of the terrorists of the current metagame has been the 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 sword and board malefactor in Necrofactorium.
Yeah, the 13-point or 14-point. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you can get like a sword and board malefactor as cheap as 12. What are they? They're soul claiming is 1, fell axe is 7, shield is 4. Yeah, you get them as cheap as 12, and they're 13-20. And by the way, POW 18 grievous wounds. Yeah, so I reckon like the Econo box sword and board malefactor is probably gonna get hit because that price point is just too good. But or like Storm Legion can get very cheap 12-20 warjacks. Those defensive profiles are actually going to theoretically start to create stumbling blocks. So closeout pieces are going to get more and more important. But again, like we talked about in the scrum dynamics, like there may just be an uncrossable wall of friendly and enemy bodies for casters to hide out in and contribute. Yeah. Sort of any thoughts on that, like non-caster based effects of these defensive changes?
Well, I do think that in a world where you could just have a heavy kind of sitting in the middle of a battle and you know, doing his thing every turn and killing a couple of guys, and then because he's a 13, 18 primeval, or 12, 20, he takes only a
13,
little bit of
20
damage. Or
primeval
yeah,
could be a new archetype too. Just
yeah, or
capitalize on that high base defense value.
yeah, or your opponent misses a couple attacks, or they only get a little bit of chip damage through, and then it goes again and kills a couple things. Like that dynamic is cool, at least to me. Just to have your model not just make the one charge play and kill something and die, but just kind of sit there and go back and forth in peace trades slowly.
Right. So I think for me cognitively, like the puzzle pieces, and this is like I don't have a perfect solution to this, which is sort of why this is an open-ended conversation. I would not prepared to answer Stephen Williams right out of the gate, but like it's starting to assemble in my mind. Is this a sort of in this sort of world, what happens to support styled casters, Athena or Assyria, for example? Do they just get left behind? So the picture that's starting to emerge in my mind is like, okay, casters who can contribute personally and like would often historically do so by putting their own butts on the line are going to enjoy a quite substantial appreciation of their offensive power, and their survivability is going to go up. There are some casters who were marginal who will probably get a unique opportunity to shine, and there are some casters who are already phenomenal at this that will start to become borderline abusive. Now they're not the only kind of casters that are going to thrive in this environment. So like, because that's one of 3 answers to the change in the lethality dynamic. And honestly, I think uh, it's one of 3 answers to the change in the lethality dynamic of the game. The other 2 answers are both break the lethality dynamic. So that would be the casters who come out the other side with significant offense buffing capabilities, to just say like, I don't care if the designers change the numbers, like I'm still going to run you over. I mean, virtually guaranteed to be an example of this is Bodan Lesnoy. Like, I don't think that
Yeah.
caster loses insight.
No, it's his
Insight
key
is like,
spell.
oh, whoopity doo! My army took a single point of mat hit. I am still going to explode everything I touch. Also, I'm just randomly harder to kill. So you'll be looking at like numbers fixers like that, depending on where brine bloods go and where their damage buffing gets allocated. Like, shockingly, most of their ability to be mat 12, POW 17, like most of it doesn't come off the rack. It's just inbuilt features of the faction. So like Brine Bloods is looking at a world of hyper offense, and they may actually have a mild preference for support casters who enable it consistently. I think the other way that you break the lower lethality metagame is you break it in the opposite direction. You say, okay, your values are slightly worse. I'm going to make that punishing for you. And I mean, this might be somebody like Dabara with defense formation. Like if you have a bunch of strikers rocking an inconvenient defense value combined with an elevated armor value, is like, this is troublesome to deal with.
Well, think about like Siphon and Dark Ops.
Mm-hmm,
You know,
mm-hmm.
right now is like a wall of arm 22 monstrosities is annoying for a turn, but in that world, like it could just mean that you don't score any objectives that turn because you cannot kill them.
Right. And then Siphon just says, and the next turn everybody slams and I score every objective.
Yeah. So that I think that like a brick defensive caster or whether they buff armor or defense is going to still be really relevant. In fact, it'll be more effective.
Yeah. 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 So I mean, I think there are certain casters who are like, I hope she gets a lot of love. Kishtar is like so almost there for me to really, really, really like the caster, but she's not quite. But like, oh, the defense 12 and 13 in my faction becomes meaningful, and I have Surefoot on tap already, and I have a universal army buffing feat. What was it in their big live stream recently? They said like single wound warriors just get last word. Like, that's a prickly army. Like that's just an army that kind of sucks to attack all the time. You know what I mean?
Yeah, speaking of Orgoth, I was really hoping for I'm hoping for something good for Sabrith.
Mm-hmm.
She has Fog of War already. So, something along those lines, or like just rat values going down means that, defense 14 shooting into is going to be a lot harder to hit.
Yeah.
So that's a lot nicer.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Rough Seas, whoever winds up with that, the spell is not quite as dead as it once was, because as of today, Rough Seas is awful. It is unusable. Do not play it. Like, it's essentially only good against Winter Core because they can't hit anything anyways. But yeah. I mean, so I think, where do casters like Athena or Assyria stack up? Do they just fall behind? I think Athena is quite likely to have a metagame place. I think casters like Assyria, unless you're breaking the lethality metagame in either direction, it's going to be hard for you unless you're an inevitable caster. And honestly, inevitable casters are breaking the lethality metagame in a different way, just on the back of personal prowess. Honestly, of those options, because a lot of who breaks defensive metagames right now when we're in a hyper lethal environment, there's not necessarily a lot of casters who can tank through all that. but even of the ones that, like, speculatively could tank through a good amount, they don't necessarily do it all the time. Versus a caster who's premising on their own survivability and offensive capability, creating inevitability. Like, they don't do it turn 1, they don't do it turn 3, or they don't do it turn 2, but they start to do it turn 3, and every turn after that, if they can stay in the game, which things die less now theoretically, their impact gets more and more meaningful. So I mean, to me, of the different paradigm options, playing inevitable casters certainly sounds the most exciting and thrilling from a play experience perspective. But like, often if you've got this maneuvering and positioning game down, which like all of us will have some adjusting to do, come next year, but like if you've got that game more or less down, like, and games already go long, you might start to like really create unique metagame problems.
And we know that they're going to see some sort of change probably with the feat for like Kythos.
Mm-hmm.
But I think finding a caster like that is sort of a supporty style caster, maybe especially with their feat, but also has like inevitability as well as just making it throughout the game difficult with like having annoyance bubble and all of that stuff, is going to be something to really like look out for. Somebody that kind of can break like into both molds. They have like real abilities to kill models and assassination plays, even in like a big scrum battle, but also make it so that it's really difficult for you to be punished.
Right. Yeah. Who are your top picks for this?
Well, it would be Kythos if he stays even close to similar.
Sure. Well, Kythos is an interesting one, because I think, like, once again, we have a preview for where we can look for the 2026 meta, which is, we already have a spell rackless Kythos that's been published. You know what I mean? So we got add to stage. We got this guy. Excellent.
Yeah.
Kythos.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was going off of.
No, yeah. We got
Psychic Assault, Deadweight.
Yep. No, yeah, this guy has revive. He's not gonna personally kill you, but like,
Psychic Assault has killed people.
That's true. Yeah. What Kythos is going to do is like, in the game as it exists right now, it's difficult to grasp that that Shadow Tongue is just better Fire Quill, at first blush. But like, the way things are right now, like, Shadow Tongue can just fire nuke spells at you and do more impact than Fire Quill can. Kythos, with as many spray attacks as he has in his Dark Operations variation, can just attack a lot of models with superior attack stats. That's quite impactful. I like, man, it was the WTC 2 years ago. I was in a rough position where, like, I was like, okay, two of the heavies you were using to set up on Big Pig just died out of the blue. Like, you ain't killing Big Pig this game. Your battle group attrition plan is down the toilet bowl. You got to dig deep to pull this one out. And what it turned out the answer was basically every turn, Shadow Tongue dumps his entire stack into offensive spells to kill models. Is like, I have rerolls to hit. You're dead. You're dead. You're dead. You're dead. Pass. Like, next turn, you're dead. You're dead. You're dead. You're dead. Pass. Like, how many times can you afford to just lose 4 models a turn and run out of your ability to play scenario? And it turns out the answer to that was 2 rounds.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think looking for casters that can kind of do both, be offensive and be defensive when they exist, is optimal.
Mm-hmm.
They're not going to be around very long, I think, in that way.
Mm-hmm. So do you have any other like top picks for that role? You know, because my mind immediately goes to personal output, but I have like struggled to think of, well, who sustains it though?
Well, I think Kane doesn't have the defensive side, but he definitely sustains it, right? Because he's
Yeah.
Rat 9. He can kill a couple things every turn instead of shooting things instead of dumping spells. But the spell one is definitely like a thing. Nothing else comes to mind right now, but
Mm-hmm.
to your point, Shadow Tongue kind of is too, because you have the choice of either spam revive and bring guys back and make the game even longer, and your defensive tech is basically revive, right? Or you can hex blast things off the board.
Right. You know who might be Winter Core actually might have more of these than I was expecting, as much as I was like ripping on Baronova, but somebody like Vilcool, she in her current incarnation has a pretty good army conservation defensive feat. She does have that prowl technology that we were talking about in the context of Behemoth, and she just has really good personal output. One, she's pressuring your caster all the time because of the Cyclone personal assassination threat. And two, she can just make a lot of attacks. Like, if she can bully the enemy caster out, buy herself room in Scrum land to just maybe burn a Cyclone, just killing a bunch of guys off an objective, having a bunch of native weapon master attacks, getting whatever spells she picks up to her personal kit from the rack dissolution. Like, this might be the kind of caster that just does it all, and the longer and longer the game goes, Vilcool still being on the table gets worse and worse for your opponent.
Yeah, I agree. I think that there is definitely like something to look at where you have like a butcher or something that is all output, but the casters that can kind of do both, that have the defensive tech and also will still be able to kill things very easily on their own, are going to be real problems.
Yeah. Dave Lee, I like caster with 0 attack profile. Makes it feel like I'm not buying into wasted stats. All right, what are your thoughts on this one, David? Because I have some strong opinions, but I'm gonna let you go in for that one.
Well, I mean, the caster we just talked about with Shadow Tongue has no attack profile, but he has offensive spells. So I don't know. That's still an attack profile to me. Arcane 8 is a pretty good stat.
Yeah. Oh, it's so good. It's how about we just don't miss?
I'd rather have that than whatever, Sabrith has when she has 2 swords. No, double Witchmark swords are really good though.
Double Witchmark swords? That's such a like heavy warjack. I hit you with my stupid little knife, and now you're crippling grasped, and I hope everything else kills you. So Issyria, for example, honestly, I think Issyria is one of those casters that's actually probably going to start falling by the wayside, because she doesn't fall into breaking the lethality metagame either way. And she has 0 personal output, which means essentially the longer the game goes, generally the worse she gets. She has some edge because she shoves herself. But like, here's the thing. One, now all casters cost 0 points, so you ain't really buying anything. But also like caster stats, weapons, abilities. Many of these are set on the theming level, many are set on the sculpt level, on the design level. And it's been, a sort of thing philosophically for a long time that a lot of casters' offensive accoutrements are vestigial. Like, what weapons does Ekaterina Baranova have? It doesn't matter. What weapons does Yana Kavasky have? Um, well, it doesn't matter in most meta games, but like it could actually quite matter that she has an unbelievable number of initials. And some at quite good POW. So caster offensive stats, like design space, it has seemed to me, as somebody who has never been a play tester, never been a game designer, seems to me to be heavily subjected to theming, heavily subjected to what's already sculpted, or in the in sort of the top level like aesthetic design directions, and two, just not really costed into the model when it comes to casters. So as this begins to develop, and the designer, if the designers are concerned for this kind of thing, I think you will see it get some attention. But like, it's often not wasted points, because it's often not counted the same as it would be on something that you're paying for. In addition to that, like, you can say like it's psychological, like, almost, because people get really bad psychologically about sunk cost fallacy, but people can also get equally bad about anti-sunk cost fallacy. Boom Howler having a hand cannon is way better than Foul Blood not having one, because you always have the option to contribute. Boom Howler having her POW 14 Grievous Wounds sword does not matter most games, but like maybe 1 in 15, 1 in 20 games, it matters a lot that Boom Howler upkeeps Avenging Force on herself, walks 3 inches, takes a hand cannon shot, kills a guy controlling an objective, rotates Storm Rager to herself, goes and cleans up a contesting light on her own, fires another hand cannon shot, kills another dork who would contest, and does all this on turn 5. And like, you got one half of the scenario in the bag because your caster had these offensive stats, and it's not even what she's leaning on. Honestly, she's one of those casters where like her having a hand cannon is basically aesthetically vestigial, but it's very consequential. And it's consequential relative to a similar caster who doesn't. Foul Blood essentially has no opportunity to personally contribute at any point during a game. And that's a big blow against him.
Yeah, he is not an offensive caster, that's for sure.
Mm-hmm. Or like even just having somebody like Anson Wolf, like, sure, most of what you're going to be doing, in any given game is like, I cast spells, I allocate focus sometimes late game because it's Storm Legion, I never have to allocate, but like I allocate sometimes. But what Wolf does is like, he actually has an offensive body, and him walking forwards as like, oh boy, you better not screw up because I have blood quenched and sidestep, and like, you better not jam with a bunch of single wound infantry guys because I'm about to turn into Butcher and you're not going to be able to kill me. These are all consequential, and I think we're living in a world where like 2025 right now, you can get a lot of leverage by pushing the fact that your caster has a great offensive and defensive body, and there's a variety of ways to have a good one. I think in the world we're going into, it may be game deciding the ability to push that suite of facts.
Yeah, I think that I don't see like a caster like Vargas, even if he were to completely lose his feat that he has right now, being bad, because he has the ability to kill most things on the table with his gun.
Mm-hmm.
He's got, strong defensive stats. So, no matter what he does, he's still going to be a threat and be able to remove pieces throughout the whole game and do
Mm-hmm.
it safely. Same thing like you talked about with Wolf. You have, Vanish on Horusk, which
Mm-hmm.
is another kind of, same kind of thing.
Oh, Horace is such a bully. It's like, yeah, this caster most games just sits there and generates rerolls and pops a feat for armor buff, but like he's also POW 17. He also threats, what is that, 5, 8, 10, or is he speed 6? He threats like 14 inches, mat 8, POW 17. If your caster winds up in whatever that number is, they're probably dead.
Yeah,
Um,
nonlinear threats are tough.
and he's just sitting in the back like, I'm a support caster. I'm a support caster.
Well, now he will
And
be
and
sitting in the front line hitting things with his big
right,
sword.
exactly. No, yeah, he'll sit in the back like, I'm a support caster. I'm a support caster. And then your opponent will start like riding up and creating localized superiority, especially on like distant flanks where like, maybe your jackals die. And like, it's one of the areas where Orgoth, particularly Horusk, struggles to exert pressure. And Horusk is like, give me that tactician aura. I'm going to vanish and just kill everything that came in over there and disrupted my formation. Get out of here. Oh, by the way, I'm back to being a support caster hanging out in the back.
Yeah, or I'm just gonna kill this heavy that's in the middle of my guys because I have a POW 17 sword and I can.
Yeah. Sorry, Dave Lee, I just want to answer this one because it was up on screen for a while. As a Shadow Flame Shard player, I get Nixian attacks quite a lot, but I feel like, and then this is where you lose me, that Sword Todd design a lot. Not sure what the tail end of that means. I will just like I've come out kind of aggressive on this point, and it's actually a good and very illustrative question, but this has been a pet peeve for me for more than a decade. Like the human brain, there's that thing about the sunk cost fallacy, but the human brain also really likes symmetry. And like one of the biggest War Machine level ups you'll ever have is stop deploying and unpacking your force symmetrically, unpack it asymmetrically. But it also has symmetry in loving how effects come down and like reaching back into antiquity for me. Like I used to play a lot of Mordekar. Mordekar has hollow, gives a unit essentially Mordekar gets souls and they get tough. And I'm like, always put this on Annihilators. And people are like, why put it on Annihilators? You're not getting the benefit out of tough. And it's like, because Annihilators are literally the single best target for it. They're the single best unit that loves to do what that spell does. They benefit a lot from getting in there and getting stuck in and dying. And like, but I bring swordsmen, so my swordsmen gain tough. I'm like, getting the tough doesn't matter. Swordsmen are less good at going and standing in places and dying than Annihilators are. And when you revive a swordsman doesn't kill 4 guys. Annihilator does. And it's like people are trying to pursue this symmetry and like, using the whole buffalo in ways that don't really matter. And it's not personal, Dave Lee. It just sets me off. It's one of my trigger points. Shaved Cosmo head looks great. Yes. I finally got so fed up with my own laziness and paid somebody to deal with my nonstop hair problem for me. Sorry, I just like had another one of my like absolute like going off a cliff moments. David, did you have
Good.
any thoughts on that area or on where Mr. David Lee's been coming in for us?
No, I mean, I think it makes sense. I think that if I were to pick a caster that doesn't have an offensive profile or one that does, and they're basically the same, there's no reason to not have a melee weapon and or a ranged weapon.
Mm-hmm.
It only makes your character better.
Yeah. Well, that was always the sort of grand experiment of Assyria, because like, sorry, I pick you of all the guests to be like the the person I dump all the old lore on. But it
When
was
I know the least.
yeah. No, yeah, because you're like just a Mark IV guy, right?
Just this year, yeah.
Mm-hmm. So Assyria was actually sort of the grand experiment because prior to that, literally every caster had some kind of weapon, some kind of damage dealing spell. Everybody had something, even if it was the Witch Coven with like their dorky POW 7 dispel knives, they still had Stygian Abyss. You know, like everybody had something. Like, let's print a caster with literally zero offensive output and see if she's good enough. And she kind of was for 2 editions or so. But I think she's starting to show her age. And I think we're also starting to enter into an epoch where it's not just the existence of these casters that are great, but even just the casters that are okay at running the table, that in this new metagame is gonna start to like really start to expose the limitations in that grand experiment, you know, and maybe get like, you know, a stop in consideration for her. Like casters I'm thinking of, like Kirax in Shadow Flame Shard. Kirax is not a world beater in and of himself. Like, okay, Vortex of Destruction is pretty neat. Okay, 2 medium powered weapons is pretty neat. You know, Cleave, reposition, like he's got all these little things. It's like mostly just that Kirax is hard to kill, so he gets to punch above his weight because it's almost never worth attacking him. Like Kirax is not somebody like Butcher 5 who's coming in like, I'm gonna kill you all. Kirax is like, I'm gonna plod forward and I'm definitely gonna make melee attacks, and you are not going to punish me for doing this because it's preposterously hard for you to do so. And if you let me keep making melee attacks indefinitely, you're going to have a problem. Like, it's not an all at once, it's not a blitzkrieg. It's just, I want to be making melee attacks to turn my army on. And also, by the way, me making melee attacks on you turn over turn creates problems. Like, Zadesh used to do this back in the day. Like, POW 12 flank, big whoop. Flashing blade, neat. But like, there's only so many times you can let Zadesh dump his whole stack into that. Like, then you're just out of models. It, you know, it doesn't matter. And you know, especially like the armies are killing each other around this caster making their modest input. When you hit turn 5, their modest input is now game defining.
Yeah, that's a good way, I think, to segue back into the original concept, right? Is it's not even just like, oh, well, this caster is good at killing things, but it can make an asymmetrical impact throughout the course of the game, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like if your caster is good at killing 3 or 4 models a turn, and their caster is good at staying in the back, then you're going to be at an advantage come turn 4 or 5.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right. And that's sort of the, just a real quick one. I think Umbria is going to see a lot of Lycia Resnikova because of their turnover turn output. Honestly, unless he gets like slapped in quite a noticeable way, I wouldn't be surprised if you actually continue to see Aslanov. There's
He
some
kills
very
things well.
yeah, there's some very specific rules on him that like have to be slapped to stop this caster from being inevitable, and not just in like a, you know, over the top Butcher way, but in like a kind of Kirax way. Like, he can't just keep getting away with it.
He's actually a good example of another good offensive and defensive caster, right?
Mm-hmm,
Battle
mm-hmm,
formation, and also he has pounce, so he just
mm-hmm.
jumps on something and kills it.
Yep. No, yeah, and it doesn't even have to be a caster. It can just be like, oh ho ho, look at this. I beat your dorky little liegeman with guns over here. And now I'm capping this flag. And you know, Max is like, okay, walk, leap, now you're all dead.
Yeah, I'm gang
Who
fighter
else
now. Thanks.
who else wants to come at this flag? And like, nobody really feels good about coming at you on this flag. Likewise, another caster who I think is like, and mind you, I am saying this as somebody who is like, I have straight up zero experience playing against, never mind even like seeing Kazimir Morozov on the table. So I have no idea how he turns out. He looks underwhelming for his inevitability factor now, but like that might get real good in the future.
Yeah, he could move pretty far when he
Yeah.
starts killing stuff.
Well, and he can also move enemy models pretty far with just
Yeah.
straight up smite. Like that's pretty consequential for late game dynamics.
Yep. Yep. He's also another one that will be really interesting to look at next year and see kind of where he falls as a really good high output caster.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I think you're right on Max specifically. There's going to be a lot of rules changes that need to be touched, or he is going to remain a problem.
Right. Well, and I mean, it could be he just gets shaved around the edges, and maybe he's not like, like hitting your balls with a sledgehammer on every vector, but he's certainly tapping one of them with a ball peen hammer every turn, and that also doesn't feel good. And that would be a perfectly respectable place for a caster who breaks, or who pushes the offensive aspect of low lethality, a caster who pushes the defensive aspect of low lethality, and a caster who brings inevitability as a counter to lethality entirely. And there's something like, I'm really thankful that we decided to have a development conversation, because there is a core thing here, which is like inevitability is difficult to express on paper. Like you can't point to a single thing without knowing that turn 5+ War Machine is a very different game from turn 2, 3, and 4 War Machine. And most people often don't have the experience with turn 5+ War Machine to really appreciate how much it changes, and how having a caster who dominates that environment can change your game, and that a lower lethality environment certainly threatens to push more games into a territory of being 5+. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's going to be a more common thing for the game to get to higher turns, because if you're just sitting, not scoring scenario because you have a big mess in the middle of the table on 2 points, then it's going to be harder for somebody to run away with the game that way.
Mm-hmm.
So you're going to go to more rounds and take longer for the game to get to the point where somebody is in the lead.
Right. And it's particularly if your caster's inevitability comes from if your caster's inevitability, a component of it is their ranged factor too. They may start appreciating a lot faster than the late game situation. Like Kane in his current manifestation, like Kane 4 is a bizarre caster, because you see his spell list and you're like, oh yeah, Calamity and Witchmark, and like, oh yeah, Teleport. It's maybe a little different in Gravediggers, but in Storm Legion, this caster, like, the second to last thing he ever wants to do is cast Calamity. It's so much of his stack. It's annoying and involves non-trivial exposure to him. The last thing he wants to do is cast Teleport, i.e., he never wants to have to stand in a position to commit 2/3 of his resources to keeping his own ass safe. So these like jump off the page as like a turn, 2 through 4 player, like, oh, this is great. This is what this caster does. And like you put him down and you get some experience with him, and you realize what Kane actually wants to do is kill 3 to 4 guys every turn and be completely safe, and say to your opponent, feed me 3 to 4 more guys. Like just put them in my mouth. And like, you can't keep doing that forever. And I want you to feel like you have to keep doing that forever. And the earlier you start to have like this gravitational tug of personal inevitability, like the better they are.
Yeah, he is a good example right now, I think, especially of like a high inevitability caster.
Mhm.
I think it'll still stay that way. It makes sense.
Yeah, I would not be terrifically shocked to see Kane stay in a similar niche. Although, like, I really enjoyed playing Kane, but I have heard over the last few months, like, yeah, most people don't enjoy playing against Kane. Like, essentially, the community consensus is it feels awful to fight Kane for. um, yeah. Um, Yeah, so I think it's just a different game world and a different perspective, and we're gonna have to get used to it. Just as one last mention for casters with inevitability, even in present day War Machine, Decathus, this guy
That's
has
true.
no plan other than inevitability. Like, I'm just gonna walk at you. I'm just
Butcher
gonna
3
walk at
too.
you. Yeah, and I'm gonna walk at you with a bunch of stealth heavies, and like if I need to, I'll just be impossible to kill. But eventually, you have to feed me something.
Teleport, kill a bunch of your stuff, sit on a bunch of souls, can't kill me.
Yep. No, yeah. I mean, Decathus is like he's echoing. Man, it's the Hellraker came out at such a weird time in the year, and I feel like the model is honestly underexplored because of how little time it had in the competitive year. Um, Sorry, once again, I'm gonna deep lore dump on you. Decathus is another one of the casters in the long history of Baranova. It's Zerkova 1, 2. Oh, what's his name? Savrin. It's Irisk 1, 2. Wolf. It's Striker 2, 2. It's the same caster again. Decathus is Terminus 1, 2. There once upon a time there was a very similar caster named Lichlord Terminus who had basically the exact same battle plan. And he was slightly, like, marginally harder to kill than Decathus, like, sometimes. But in late in the competitive viability of Terminus, there evolved a metagame strategy where you would bring a Crix Colossal, and your Colossal would be the game-winning piece for your army. The goal would have your Kraken or Sepulcher just kill a bunch of things and do it under controlled circumstances, but it's a Crix Warjack, so it's not the toughest and all that. And how you would deliver this thing is your caster would run in front of it and block for your Colossal. Your caster would face tank for your Colossal. We haven't spent much time with the Hellraker and its offensive capabilities. Like, maybe there's a problem there, but like, I feel like there might be a Decathus strategy where you can have your caster put his inevitability to use, not just in like, you'll have to give me something sooner or later, but like, I'm, okay, I'm going to walk forward and be inevitable and make you think about where your models go and you don't want to feed them to me. And the effect of this is a model that's going to be long run worse for you is getting to untap every turn and do meaningful things.
Yeah, I could see that. He's also kind of similar to Butcher 3, I think, right? In his
Oh,
actual
sure. Yeah, yeah.
abilities.
If he gets into the right kind of targets, it's like, what are you gonna do? Kill me?
Yeah. Yeah, he is him and Hellraker, especially with changes, is definitely something to consider trying.
Mm-hmm.
Using him as a sort of a body block is interesting. And I think the Hellraker was a little overshadowed by the Phantasm this year.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, yeah. For colossals that debuted late in the competitive cycle, the Phantasm sucked up a lot of oxygen in the room. like Chiriboga debuting the double Phantasm, like that's scary. That's real scary.
Yeah, I think maybe also the Hellraker could use some point reductions on some of its things might help because I think
Mhm.
it's still like minimum 28 points.
Yeah, that's a rough spot to be.
It's not.
Ugh.
It doesn't have that high an output of for it being an
Yeah.
expensive colossal.
Yeah, relative to the Kraken or Sepulcher, like I think the thing that really differentiates it is the Hellraker doesn't really have like much of a ranged presence, whereas the Kraken and the Sepulcher definitely did. I mean, it might help if it was more of a melee colossal too. Like if you're really incentivized to go in on the Burrow Blast head, and maybe if it just had like a little more gas and personal output. I mean,
Yeah,
Decathis does help. He gives it Dark Shroud, but like I don't know how great that is.
yeah. It has the Burrow Blast and 2 initial melees, right? I think that's it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Baseline, yeah.
yeah. That's not a lot to go off of for the point value.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I remember Brad Park talking about this over on his spell rack wish list. And, like that is one of the Colossal's potential problems, is like essentially just that its initial count is very low. And sort of table stakes right now is 6 initials for contemporary Colossals. So
Yeah. If you do the math, the problem I think with it is that it just doesn't kill any other colossals
mhm, mhm.
ever,
Yeah,
and that's a big downside to playing something that's that many points.
yeah. Well, I don't know. I I prefer this as a historical example that I think Decathis has the opportunity to run, and it's a question of whether or not it becomes relevant. And you're right to point out a lot of that does rely on the Hellraker getting its act together. Oh shoot. Well, any other thoughts on caster inevitability? I guess I've been trying to take a crack at like, okay, I've we've sort of hashed out the idea and delivered sort of um gone through our permutations on this old offhand mentioned comment, and I think turned it into a real thing. Do you have any like last explications or final notes you want to get in on the
Well,
on caster inevitability and how we think it's going to come forward?
well, I think that the concept is something to really consider. I don't know if it's always going to be the most important thing. It probably won't.
Hmm.
But I think that it will hopefully help a lot of casters next year become more viable than they are now because they do have high personnel output, even if they don't have the best utility or spell list or some other attributes that make
Hmm.
them or maybe they're just less synergistic, but they
Yeah.
kill things really well, and that's a really fun part of the game. So
Hmm.
I'm happy to see more casters that are good at killing things be played.
Right. Yeah, this actually might be a godsend for somebody like Yana, who's like, you look at her today, and it's like, what is your spell list offer? Like, not much. What is your feat offer? Not much. Your
Hey,
kit
she
of
has
abilities?
boundless charge.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's true. But I mean, like in general, she's like her spells and her feat are not really speaking for her. Like they're not the loudest messaging thing.
It's her on
Like,
a bear.
yeah, if we look at like we're moving into a game where caster personal presence dominates more, as like what do your spells and feat do? Like not much. Okay, what do you offer? Like I have 4 melee initials and immovable object, and attacking me is a waste of time. Like Oh, that's a pretty good offering.
I think she should get bare hands next year, so she does knock down.
Oh man. All right. Well, I think we'll close out the inevitability discussion. Do you have a little bit more in you if we want to go for a few more minutes?
Sure.
Okay, so I had one that I think we talked about in the pre-show. And I always wonder, one of the goals here, obviously, this is a concept development thing. So like, fingers crossed, we've done a good job of making the case that caster inevitability is a concept that has legs and will be taken forward into future discussion. But one of my goals being in the in-between season, you kind of always have to make timely content because talking about 2025 models like may not necessarily be timeless, but I try to have these discussions be about something that's sort of like eternal and will provide lasting value to people. So I noticed a comment today as I was gearing up for the episode, on a past video. I don't want to put a particular person on blast because the comment is negative, but it is a compelling thing. So he talks about, it would really help if you would mechanically explain how to do the dismantling of threat ranges. Like, essentially he said, like, you guys kind of talk about it, but I'm not left getting it. And I feel like the term dismantling threat ranges is maybe like, almost a community equivalent of like get good scrub. So David, I want to ask you, as somebody who is relatively new to the game, but is like, you're in the process of, distinguishing yourself. What are your observations about, saying nothing else about it? What are your observations about dismantling threat ranges? And, for somebody 1 year in the game, what do you think, what do you think about doing that as somebody who's at a deficit?
I think it depends on what sort of threat ranges you're referring to. The gun ranges, you have spells like Windstorm.
Mhm.
You have things like Stealth and Fog of War, and
Say we're in 2025 dynamics,
yeah.
and we know that there are guns, but guns are mostly there to put pressure on you to get you to engage, and your opponent's got the longer melee alpha range. Like, we're in 2025 dynamics where like A goes in, B kills A, C kills B, D kills C. Like, how do you start to deal with that? Because by the time you get to B kills A, you're typically at like, okay, but our armies are like 8 inches closer to each other. So like, you know, like it's the B kills A that's really the thing that stumbles a lot of people, because after B kills A, you're kind of not really in threat range math territory anymore. How do you look at that?
Well, I would say, like, a lot of times when I feel like I'm greatly out-threatened by another army, a lot of times the best thing to do is to jam.
Mhm.
Just run your guys that you care about less in, that are less likely to kill the things in your opponent's army anyways. And
B
then
kills A, but I've got a lot of A.
yeah, or I've got C that kills B, right? So
Mhm.
I think that that's a very practical way of dealing with it. You can play it based off of like the board too, like with terrain
Mhm.
and scenario elements even.
Right.
Just the other day when I was playing against my friend playing Scorn, his Mammoth couldn't charge me because the cohort objective was basically blocking him from getting to me. So uh, even though I wasn't in a position to charge him, it meant that we kind of had our colossals stare at each other, but it also meant that he couldn't stick it in my face, which would have been really bad.
Right.
So sometimes just positioned properly around the board and scenario elements and terrain elements, jamming a lot. That's kind of what I've developed, at least.
Right. Yeah, and part of the reason why I don't name this guy, hopefully he's watching. I don't want to put him on blast because if he's not understanding it, there's other people that aren't understanding it, and I think like really re-articulating it is useful. The scenario thing is great, and like having a forest that you can hide behind and like maybe a movement cheat to get line of sight out of it, like the fact that your opponent can't charge you shaves a bunch of range off their threats. Like maybe it's enough for you to get the drop off on them if you can like warpath or telekinesis or something to get through that. Likewise, colossal threat ranges can be absolutely game defining, but if there's a piece of quicksand or a 50 mil objective where it's like, oh god, I have a lot of 120 mil real estate that I need to park somewhere and I can't quite reach if I have to park it on either side of this. Oh, what do we got here from Jay Beatnik? Base speed, reach, 3-inch, charge is what I call basic melee threat. Roadhog 5+3+1, so 9. When I tell people about my army, I let them know, go on the base, and then I go back talk conditionals. So most of my stuff is 9, but then I talk about Carver's mobility up to 11, full bore on this specific war beast up to 13. That's absolutely fair. Like breaking, if you can break down the math on what your opponent's doing and know their conditionals, that actually gives you room to operate. And sometimes it can be like, okay, you can get, like 14 inches on me, which outranges all my stuff. But getting that 14 inches is based off of you casting Hunter's Mark. And based on the resources you have available, you can only really kind of do that once per turn. So I'm just going to park a bunch of things at 12.1 instead of 14.1, make you choose the Hunter's Mark. Okay, great. You get your Hunter's Mark thing, but the rest of your army still has to keep moving forward to come and play on scenario or to support the thing that just charged in on that Hunter's Mark. And like, now the ranges between us, like the difference between my 11-inch threat range and your 14-inch threat range is now inconsequential. It's only bonus movement to assist in moving side to side and redeploying between theaters. So I give you this one out to use this component of your threat range advantage, but now your threat range advantage, after getting this one advantage to kill the A that I wanted you to kill because it's the least important to me, now your threat ranges no longer matter. For the rest of this game, the fact that you threat 14 inches and I threat 11 is of no consequence because we're all fighting like this far apart for the rest of the game. I mean, that's one way of thinking about it. I think another way of like thinking about dismantling threat ranges is even just alluding to the scenario thing again. If you have like, the scenario elements are fixed. Your threat ranges are relative, but the distance between the scenario pieces never changes. If you know your opponent has to have a cohort model in this spot at some, like basically for the rest of the, meaningful length of the game, where their cohort's going to be. They can out threat you, but you can say like, well, you out threat me by 3 inches, but like you have to stand in that area. So I can put things in that can contest, that can bully you off of it. Like you're either going to have to leave that area or choose to enter my threat range at some point so I can go and take that from you.
Yeah, that's another good point too, is if you threaten 11 and they threaten, or you threaten 8 and they threaten 11 and their piece is sitting on a 50, well, you put your guy within 8 of it, and they're either going to move off of the scenario or they're going to let you charge it next turn.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. Yeah. Especially if they don't have the resources to let that thing go after you and then put a replacement on deck. This is like why running low battle group or low any kind of scenario model count in your army can be dangerous, because like it actually limits your ability to play offensively with a peace trade advantage if you can't back up the guy who had to leave the scenario zone to do it. We were talking in the pre-show about shape rotating. It's not necessarily universal skill, but it's an important one to be able to visualize pieces in this game. And like I feel like there's sort of almost like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, like a pyramid of visualizing War Machine games. And much like the inevitability thing, the bottom, like essentially the higher up the War Machine, Maslow's hierarchy of War Machine visualization you get, the more your visualization stage is focused on end game. Because like the baseline is like, usually early game, like my opponent threats 16 inches with all their like this big passel of heavy war beasts. It's not conditional on Hunter's Mark. What do I do about that? Guess I'll die. And you're sitting there, and like that's something you can reconstruct on your head with the War Machine app on your toilet. Like this threat's 16 inches with no Hunter's Mark all across the board. What are they going to do about it? And then you get somebody who's got that visualization level, and they're like, well, but you have to stand on this part of the scenario at some point. So I'm just going to use that to equilibrate and attenuate the ranges by saying, like, are you really prepared to go for this? Oh, you're not. Then you're going to give me the objective, or you're going to give me the peace trade, or I'm prepared to give you A so that you take it with B. And the second I take B, your threat range advantage no longer matters because the rest of our armies are too close to each other. Like that's the next visualization level up on the hierarchy. And then, you can keep going to like, okay, I've got all these support models. They're standing in the back and they're not going to do anything in like turns 2 through 4 War Machine, where most of the action in the game happens. But it's like, but where do my support models need to be meaningful on turn 5? And like, there's plenty of streams of Brandon Owens playing War Machine out there. Brandon Owens is the king of, from turn 1, moving his support models to where they need to be where they need to be on turn 5. And caster inevitability, I feel like falls into that same kind of rubric, and sort of why we had to have this lengthier discussion to get to it is because it is just one of those harder things to pop into your head as a picture, especially because most of your visual data from playing the game is early game. So I don't begrudge somebody for being upset with us for not sufficiently elaborating how to deal with threat ranges. There's a lot of shape rotating that goes into it, and hopefully this attempt at rephrasing it has helped. All right, any thoughts for you on that one? Sorry, I just like went on a big rant again.
No, I mean, I think that all makes sense. I think that the game changes the longer it goes, and you have to sometimes give something up to get something that is more valuable to you. Make your opponent take something sometimes, even if it's a piece that or unit or whatever that they don't really care about. It depends sometimes on where you put it. Kind of like how we talked about the jackals and just sticking them on an objective because they're difficult to deal with. They're like the perfect example of a sacrificial piece that your opponent's going to have to send models to kill, and then you will hopefully get something more important in return for a 5-point model.
Right. Yeah. Like I have this 18-point super heavy, and I have Hunter's Mark, and it threats all the way to like the hospital your grandfather was born at 90 years ago. Like, okay, great. That really sucks for me. Here's this 5-point model. You have to kill it. Like with my 18-point model, like, yes, you have to kill this 5-point model with your 18-point model. Like, but I'll lose my 18-point model. Like, That's kind of the point. Oh man. We got a good one from
Before we get too far into the weeds here, I have
Yeah.
something to add on the threat ranges. And my tournament experience for this is that I don't ever get charged on somebody's superior threat range. I typically go second, which means that typically the player one who is supposed to be advantaged with these superior threat ranges, I let them advance on their turn one, they run forward, and then I just simply ask them what the threat range of all of their things that are furthest forward are. I clearly mark it out on the table, and I park my stuff just outside of it. And then threat range never matters the rest of the game. And all that extra threat range that you were baking into your list is irrelevant for the most part, because as going second on the first player's second turn, if they then don't position to score or contest scenario, then I will happily sacrifice my models to gain scenario advantage on you if you want to position your models to charge into me. So that's the way I play it. That's how I dismantle a superior threat range, is I just park outside of it. And then and it's clearly marked. So there's like I've never had anybody be contentious about it or anything. Like, it's very clear that there's nothing that they can do. It's
here's your threat range. Okay, I'm going to manage it, and it's going to suck for you. Your turn.
Yeah, exactly. And the disadvantage of it is it does take a lot more clock on my second turn than the first player's first turn. So it's something to be aware of. And as Brandon Owens will tell you, that clock is a resource. And I'm gonna go away so we can get to JB Connect down here.
Okay, well, that's thank you, Keith, for not biting your tongue on that. I mean, I think this is, and part of why I wanted to bring this up is, like, okay, I was talking to Brandon and Chris when we had that discussion, and it is definitely as the commenter like mentioned, can feel like a get good scrub moment, especially when we have all of us have so much time under our belts. But it's interesting because I think, Keith and David, you guys are both like, a year-ish into the game at this point in Mark IV, and like it is distinguishable. But like, I mean, I would ask, how long did it take you of playing this game to sort of come to that distinction?
Well, I think it was like a bit of an ever evolving thing, right? It wasn't like a one day I understand how to deal with somebody that out threatens me, and the day before I didn't. But after getting beat up a lot, I think it started to kind of come together as, if I do it this way, I will not lose my pieces and I will just lose the game. If I do it this way, I might lose some pieces and not lose the game. And if I do it this way, I'll lose all my pieces and lose the game. So it was a lot of trial and error and just smashing my head into the wall.
Wait, it's interesting to, because Keith's a returning player, but like has not had his foot in for that long. And it's really interesting to hear it from you guys. And it's just sort of amazing to me how fast like player development and maturation happens these days versus how long it took in the past. I think some of that is the advent of pre-measuring, because especially like old heads will often have a greater like psychological weak spot for threat ranges because you kind of couldn't know all the time. But also like, I don't know. I've just been impressed by the new and returning players, like, like you guys, and how much you go like nose to the grindstone and are deliberately, reflective. And it would be cute to say it's all this War Machine media out there, but like we're essentially coming off of like the tail end of a dark age. So you guys sort of had to discover it for yourselves and with ambient community knowledge. So it's an impressive thing to me.
I think I would say that a lot of it was mostly just playing against like the local old heads that would, be willing to talk through what went wrong or what went right after each game. And that is like the best way to develop a new player, I think, is just to go through everything. Well, not a like, well, what if I did this instead of this, but if I played this way instead of playing the way I did, rather than moving one piece here or there, because it's very rarely like especially early on, like a one model made me lose the game kind of situation, right? It's an overarching strategy where whether it's deployment or misinterpreting or understanding like threats or not going after the right pieces when you can go after your opponent's models. That all gets discussed afterwards, and that I think is like the best way to help a new player get better at the game.
Yeah, like really, really being there to facilitate that kind of active and meaningful reflection, and like really, really like let's get into the nuts and bolts, and like maybe I've been at phases where like I resort to copium in my game reviews, like no, let's get you past the copium and get you to the next stage of what would have really happened in this game, and like let's figure it out all the way down. I mean, I've said for a long time that players should probably spend more time in reflection than they do in play, but you should also spend a lot of time in play, which tells you how much time you should have in reflection.
Yeah, I mean, it was a lot of losses you have to accept, I think, as a new player if you want to get better, that you're going to lose a lot and that you can't let it bother you. And you have to have a good community like I do, where, and I think a lot of people do, because this is such a good game with a good community, where you can have people that will walk you through what they did that worked in the game and what maybe you did that didn't work quite well, or what you did that did work well, and go through all of that. And then you can think about it and then play the next night again and lose in a different way and figure it out.
Yeah, absolutely. Mad Max L2L dumping more historical War Machine lore here. Just play Mark II Scorn. Sadly, or maybe fortunately, those times are long past us. You will get a good education on baiting, model value versus X that quickly evolved into playing from the end game. It was a great management skill you were forced to develop. So I will say, I spent 15 years more or less as a main Scorn player over the course of this game. I would advocate it from time to time. Like, okay, you're kind of leaning on threat ranges, or like your skill set is sort of bolstered by the strength of your faction, but these fundamentals are weak. Like, if you want to really improve, take a year playing nothing but old Scorn, where you were out threaded all the time and you just have to win on like having superlative positioning. Weirdly, like Scorn was the hardest hit by that challenge, but actually Crix players, as advantaged as they were in many previous editions of the game by, just the meta being very friendly to them and their pieces being very powerful, were also basically always out threaded. And they just had to learn how to play the positional game. Like there was no other option. Like you must learn to beat faster opponents on position alone.
Yeah, I don't know if that's so much Western reaches anymore, at least.
No, not really. Not with the stable of casters they got. All right, I'm gonna close out on one J Beatnik comment. We won't go through it tonight. There's an interesting topic to be talked about of strategic losing on scenario, where you want them in the zone to score, or you want them to clear your contesting models for later turn advantage. I think this is a fantastic topic that I would absolutely love to do a discussion on. It is going to be contingent for us on seeing what survives the grand scenario packet cull, and sort of what Steamroller 26 winds up looking like for the overall shape of the game. Because a lot of the dynamics we are talking about are sort of premised on where models stand right now, and it's sort of in some common predictable regions for most scenarios. So strategies tend to work cross scenario. We'll see how that goes next year. Let me see. Before we close out, so something since our last conversation is, David, you've sort of been the the grand driving force on getting Pan Southwestern War Machine going. So is there anything on the calendar for 2026 or sort of, in Southwestern War Machine that people should be looking out for, paying attention to coming up?
Yeah, actually, thanks to Brandon Owens for organizing a cool Iron Gauntlet qualifier in San Diego, I think in April, like April 10th and 11th or something like that.
Something like that. It is in Longshanks. It's going to be at Ease Games. They have a big like play area. Everyone, if you're on the fence, like, do it. You're gonna see so many friendly faces there. It's gonna be a great time.
Yeah, I think we're both going to be there.
Yeah. I think a lot of us from further away than one would expect are going to be there.
Yeah, it's going to be a good event.
Any other final shout outs?
Just to my local community for being helpful and great leaders and teachers.
Yeah, I'm always really impressed by the community down there. I've been meaning to come out for more than a month, and real life has just been kicking my ass. But like, fingers crossed. I swear I'm gonna make it soon.
Yeah, sounds good. We'll be ready for you next year.
All right, awesome. Well, thanks everybody for tuning in. Keith, take us away.